Hello and welcome to Arts Alive Music. On the 31st of January, the orchestra of the Liverpool Metropolitan Cathedral will be playing a concert of romantic music, including Mendelssohn and Bruch, and they're going to be playing particularly the Bruch Violin Concerto. Now in a minute I'm going to be talking to Leo Byrne, who's the leader of the orchestra and the soloist, about the Bruch itself. But first, here's Stephen Pratt to tell us a little bit about Bruch's relationship with Liverpool.
Max Bruch came here in 1880. He was appointed in February 1880, and at the time it was a great catch for the Liverpool Phil. He was internationally known. He was a composer. His violin concerto, the one that we'll be playing on Saturday, the Opus 26, was a worldwide success for him. But at the time in Liverpool was not a great success. It was a time of quite a lot of dispute. He didn't like the way the audience behaved. And generally, although his appointment had been celebrated enormously when he arrived, by the time he left, I think a lot of people were pleased to see the back of him. Whilst he was here, he lived in Brompton Avenue in Sefton Park, and he got married. Not in Liverpool, but he got married during his time. He was here from 1880 to 1883, and his first daughter was born in Liverpool. So there are sort of Liverpool connections still there, but it wasn't a happy time really for him. And it's quite ironic, really, knowing the relationship between the Hallie and the Liverpool Phil and the discussions between Liverpool and Manchester about which orchestra was on the scene first, that it was actually Sir Charles Hallie who came over to Liverpool after Bruch's time here to rescue the situation. The ironic thing, I think, is that after his time, the orchestra and the choir were left really quite dispirited. Standards had dropped somewhat. And of all people, Sir Charles Hallie came from Manchester to sort things out here. He was well known to the Society already. He had been a conductor on and off with the Society before Bruch's time, and things got back on an even keel again. The Littlefield Society, since the 1840s, had lots of ups and downs, and many orchestral societies still do. And I mean, this was just par for the course. The predecessor of Max Bruch was Julius Benedict, and he was he also had stabilised things. So it's an interesting tale of the ambition of the society, which has always been very high, finding a world-class guy who just didn't work. He didn't like the British. He was extremely rude about the British audiences and about the British musicians, and you know, what a pity really, it didn't work out particularly well. But the one thing that does come from his time in Liverpool is the great piece Kol Nidri, which he wrote for the Liverpool Jewish community whilst he was here. So we do have some nice little memento of his time in Liverpool.
The Bruch is a great piece to play. Yeah, it's not a walkover. Everyone thinks, oh, you know, this is really well known, and it's a classic FM #1 sort of thing after the Lark Assembly. But it is not a walkover, and of course I'm a good amateur, so for me it's quite demanding. But yeah, enjoy it.
And tuneful right from the start.
Tuneful right from the beginning. So there's an orchestral intro, and then there's a violin solo. And as I quite like showing off, that suits me. And then there's a bit more intro, and then comes the main. And then it's off, you know, the orchestras were all together. But yeah, it's a great piece to play. It lies well under the fingers, but the opportunities for error are multiple.
In what way?
Oh, well, it's just demanding. You know,
because it's very fast, or
because quite a lot of it is quite fast, and yeah, and there's double stoppings which are awkward, and it's got this sort of stuff. It's got. Which can all go horribly wrong, as it did.
Just tell me what double stopping is.
Oh, right. On the violin, you can play single strings, But you can play two notes together. Which on the piano is a piece of easiness, but on the violin, because you have to tune them, it's hard. And this has just had new strings, so the strings are going flat all the time. So, you know, it's horrible.
So what happens actually while you are performing, if they go flat, you can't tune it until the end of the movement?
You hope that these strings, when we do this on Saturday, they will have settled down. But you tune the strings with the pegs. The thinner string has a little adjuster to make it easier. The others... So you tune between movements.
Yeah.
You can't really do it discreetly.
No.
There's proper strings, you have to use the pegs.
But if you're in the middle of playing and you're sensing that it's going flat, can you just adjust the finger position on the...
Yeah, you have to all the time. So how do you play in tune? You just have to listen because there are no frets. And also, the bow is almost more important, because if you bow, right, here's a typical beginner, which is why people think the strings are made of catgut. It sounds like a cat's guts being torn out. So you have to bow long bows at right angles.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's interesting and hard, but like all difficult things, worthwhile.
And actually playing with the orchestra, I mean, you're practicing away at home
Yeah.
on your own, and
Yeah.
then suddenly the orchestra's there making a big noise.
Yeah. So I lead this orchestra, the Cathedral Orchestra. Steve's the conductor, and we get on very well. I am there. I'm merely a tool in his hands, of course. And the role of the leader is to communicate to liaise between the orchestra and the conductor. So if I think this is ridiculously fast, I don't hesitate to tell him.
No, but I'm just thinking about actually when you're the
Oh
soloist.
yes, when I'm the soloist. Yeah, well, it's a matter of the orchestra listening to the soloist.
Yeah.
So they have to make sure, if they can't hear the soloist, they're too loud. And vice versa, when I'm playing, if a section of, say, the flutes have a solo, well, we have to get out of the picture.
Then we get on to the second movement, which has the most beautiful tune.
Which is really famous. Yeah. And it runs straight from one movement to another. There's a tiny little break before the last movement. Basically, this goes. Of course, it's really sad. It's really German. The first movement's in G minor, which is sad. You know, it's very, very sort of Middle European Jewish. It sounds like a cantor in the synagogue, which is fabulous because, of course, the whole instrument rings because you've got more open strings.
Yes, I was thinking that actually that opening tune that you played in the first
Yeah,
movement
G
sounded like
minor.
a Jewish folk song.
Very. All the best violinists were Jewish. I mean, I'm Irish Catholic. I don't even count, you know. Okay, so violinists, there's four strings. E, which is the thinnest. A, D, and the G has the strongest sound. So violinists like playing on the G string. So Paganini wrote a whole piece, which is it, all on the G string. Etc. But I need to practice.
So then we go on to the third movement.
The third movement.
Allegro.
Yeah, because the slow movement ends. It's really a very sort of melancholy, sad piece. And the third movement, because the three sections have completely different characters, is lively. So that it starts with the drums. and so on. So yeah, it's a big thing. It'll be better next Saturday.
Well, that's Leo Byrne on Bruch. Join us again in part 2, where we discover that he has another string to his bow. As well as being a fine player of the violin, Leo Byrne has also for many years actually made his own, and cellos too. These days he concentrates on making bows, and as he showed me in his workshop, this is a pretty intricate business. So when you're making a bow, where do you start?
Oh, right, okay. I start, believe it or not, by making the bit that moves along the stick, which is called the frog. Because in the past people have made their own bows. They've made the stick, but they haven't made the frog. And I think that would be an absolute travesty. So this is the frog. The frog, and here's one I made earlier. I've been dying to say that. The frog tightens the hair. So the bow was originally the same shape as a long bow. It curved outwards in primitive instruments, and then about 1600 or thereabouts it curved inwards, because this gives more control. So you can see that this is hair from a horse's tail, which I buy. I don't go round
stealing
horses or killing horses, and I buy it ready cleaned. And the stick is bent using heat so that it's got a curve, and this bit, which is called the frog, moves along in a slot. You mortise a slot and you get a little screw. You put the screw in the end, and by turning it, it tightens the hair. And you bend the stick by using, well, they used to use a Bunsen burner or a spirit lamp. I use a hot air gun, you know, because it's the most efficient way of doing it. And so this is the frog, and this is made from a bit of ebony, which starts off like this. So ebony is a very dense wood. That's its natural colour. It's really heavy, and it's very difficult to get hold of now because it's protected. And I then make a little hole inside it. I put bits of silver, which I buy in strip. So I bend the silver round, shape it so that it fits exactly in the slot I've made. This is a silver lining which goes next to, because all frogs have a silver lining, which goes next to the stick. And I made my own dies to make that. And this is a bit of mother of pearl. I don't know if you can see this. Mother of pearl. And this is also silver. And so again, you make all these things, you make the bits to make them. So this is a shape that I've made, and it goes like that, and you bend it round and you solder it. So this is one, and you can still see the solder marks on that. Right. So that's yet to be tarted up.
So does it have to be silver, or is that a tradition, or does it play better?
It could be nickel silver, but silver lasts better. Silver doesn't tarnish. It can be gold, but gold's too expensive. I can't afford gold. Right. So perhaps when I'm famous, I will be able to make bows mounted in gold.
But it has to be ebony. Because nothing else will work?
It could be any exotic hardwood. So
it's got to be a hardwood.
It's got to be something that's going to have the requisite density, which is going to last well and resist the wear of the hand. So this is a bow which my father-in-law bought in 1920 for 5 guineas, and this is now worth between £12,000 and £15,000. But the bow you saw me using before is one that I made, which is this one, which says Leo Byrne, because it has a better sound. I mean, I've done this demonstration, and it's lovely to say, I made that. So that's a bow I made. Now, the bow wears over time, so I put a bit of leather on that. You can actually see it goes down. Yeah. I don't know if you can, where it's worn away because it's been used for the last 90 years. And the wood that you make the stick from, and it sounds perverse to make the frog first, but there's a lot of work in a frog. You said 10 minutes before, I think, Chris. It's more like 24 hours to make the whole thing. And this wood is called Pernambuco, and it's from a province in Brazil which is called Pernambuco, and it's now protected. You can't get it. So I've got some planks left, which I bought some years ago. It's very dense, it's heavy. You know, it's heavier than you would expect.
Yeah.
You're an expert in these matters, of course.
Absolutely.
And to make it, you make, first of all, you cut it roughly to shape, like that. And then you make the back of the stick completely flat, and you then make it octagonal. So this is 8-sided. I'm sorry to explain octagonal.
No, thank you. No,
And
it's
to
very
make
helpful.
that, I use jigs actually, because it's the only way I know. But this is a little plane that I've made with my own fair hand.
I was going to say, the tools
make your
you
own
need for
tools.
this. The tools you need for this are.
You can buy them, but
can't
they're
buy
very
them.
expensive.
Yeah.
And I don't think you can buy it's called a scraper plane. So instead of being, this is a little violin plane. So that would work, but instead of the blade pointing forward, the blade actually points backwards, because the wood is very knotty, if you know what I mean. Yeah. So it scrapes, and you put a little curl on the end of the blade, so it actually takes a tiny little shaving off. So what comes off are scrapings, not dust. So here are some of the tiny little shavings. And that is the wood, and it's an orange colour, and it was originally a dye wood. So if you can see that, I'll even tell you how thick it is, because I use digital gauges these days because they're so much more efficient. And that is, if I can get a straight bit, about 7/100ths of a millimetre. Oh, it doesn't exist there, but it's very, very thin. So you take the wood off as evenly as you possibly can, all the way round, to make a perfect octagon. So I've still got some to do on this. Then the head of the bow, this has got, again, an ebony lining, silver, and you use little pins which you pin in there, and then you file them down. And the wood, the hair is held between those 2 points, and here's some hair. Okay? Yeah. So that is a horse's hair,
horse.
But it's been picked and cleaned and disinfected, and for preference it comes from mares, because they wee forward, stallions, because they wee forwards, whereas mares wee backwards. So
it's purer. Yeah.
It's pure, it's clean, it's got less rubbish on it. And so you tie the hair together and you singe the end. You put a little bit of resin on. In fact, I now use wire and super glue. Super glue is a very good stuff. And then you spread the hair out to make it nice and even.
And only horsehair will do?
It tends to be Mongolian horsehair.
No, but I mean only horsehair.
Oh, yes.
No other hair will do? Or
No,
other,
I know
nothing...
it's a very kind offer, Chris, but no.
No. Well, I mean, you can't use synthetic fibres, for instance.
They have. And in fact, in the 19th century, Guillaume, who was a very famous violin and bow maker, used wire. But it doesn't really work. And
No.
synthetic, yes, they do have, but it doesn't work as well.
Okay. So what is it that makes? I mean, you mentioned that bow that was your father-in-law bought for a few hundred is now worth thousands.
No, we bought for 5 guineas.
5 guineas. Yeah.
5 guineas. And why is it worth a lot?
Yes.
Well, it bounces. When I played before, I made the bow bounce.
Yeah.
This bow was made by my hero, and he died, I think he was 87 or so. He worked for Hills in London, and he worked for 60 years for Hills. And then he retired and made bows on his own, and he was, as it were, the father of English bow making. When he left, they wouldn't let him take his tools with him.
Really?
He had to he had to leave the tools with the firm. Yeah. Anyhow, his name was William Retford, and I tried to make my bows like his and like the one that my father-in-law had. And the bow has to be strong, it has to bounce, it has to be well balanced.
What makes the bounce?
It bounces naturally. So when you drop the bow on the string, it just goes brrrr.
But what is it that you make? How is it that you make a bow that will bounce?
Oh, well, you put the spring in it. So when you make the bow, you bend it, and I use this. Now I've made a former out of other things, but now I use this one, and I clamp the stick to it like that. Yeah, exactly. I haven't taken enough off yet. And then you heat it with, as I say, a hot air gun, which is up there. And when it's like that, you then have to adjust it so that the bend is in the right place. So this is the one that I made. So you have to correct it there, and etc. So it's quite a complicated business. Yeah. There's more to it than meets the eye. So I sell my bows for £1,000. Which sounds a ridiculous amount of money, but when you consider that one is 5,000, that one is 12 or 15,000, professional players have very expensive bows.
And how many hours would have gone into making
24,
one?
I would say. They do say that one of the very famous makers from the 19th century could make a bow in a day, but that was, of course, the Victorian day, of 12 hours at the bench, and I think it was an exaggeration anyhow. So I would say about 24 hours.
Thank you, Leo.
Thank you very much, Chris.